I'm really excited. I'm so glad you guys agreed to this, It's going to be fun.
Like the whole trip. She likes to push me outside my comfort zone, and the trip was outside my comfort zone, and this is outside my comfort zone.
Yeah, you did brilliantly in the trip, and you know what your nephew said last night? He said, "Oh, Uncle Bob's going to be so good at that," meaning the podcast. So
we'll see.
The endorsement from our family member who's actually the best on camera, which is my son.
This episode is for anyone who thinks big adventures belong to younger bodies, perfect terrain, or people who have mountains nearby. It shows that readiness can be built deliberately, locally, and imperfectly over a 12-week period, and that some of the most meaningful summits are shared with a sibling, willing to put their ego on the line, train separately, commit to the same challenge, and stay accountable to one another. Susan, upon your return from Kilimanjaro, you emailed this to me. You said, "Many tales to tell of 2 days of flight catastrophes, altitude sickness, and more. We did it! ! The conditioning, every lap on stairs or hill or treadmill, each milestone challenge paid off. I was never sore or stiff. I was able to go the distance." So, Bob, are you ready to roll?
Yes.
Susan, are you ready?
So we're ready to talk. You did a beautiful setup. I think that captured us very well, don't you, Bob?
Yes.
Ego on the line.
Super.
Committed.
So, this episode isn't really about climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. It's about what happens before the mountains ever comes into view. Bob and Susan are siblings in their late 60s who decided to train for and summit Kilimanjaro together. Not as lifelong mountaineers, but as two people with very different bodies, histories, concerns, and starting points who shared the same question: are we actually ready for this? Susan came into training after bilateral hip replacements, a lifetime of running, and a strong commitment to staying active, but with real questions about balance, durability, and how her body would respond to sustained climbing day after day. Bob, 3 years younger, had a deep aerobic base from years of running and cycling, but lived somewhere almost completely flat and was anxious about back-to-back climbing days, screed descents, and whether his strength and balance were truly sufficient. Over the course of their preparation, Bob accumulated more than 155 miles and 41,000 feet of elevation gain. Susan logged roughly 140 miles and nearly 36,000 feet of climbing. They didn't chase numbers for ego, they chased confidence. Milestone challenge tested durability. Balance work and lunges became non-negotiable. Poles went from optional to essential. And slowly, something shifted. Training stopped being about, can I do this? And started becoming, I know I can do this. By the time they reached Tanzania, the mountain still delivered its chaos, flight disruptions, altitude issues. But the physical side, the part they could control, never became the limiter. Susan wasn't sore. Bob wasn't overwhelmed by consecutive days. The stairs, hills, treadmill climbs, and milestone challenges quietly did their job. They summited Kilimanjaro together, not because they were fearless, but because they were prepared. So, we have a lot to talk about, but you're welcome to share any thoughts about anything in the intro that was sparked in your mind. Susan, any thoughts?
Well, I think you captured it perfectly in terms of my state of mind going into it. I had a history, but I'll be honest, it was 30 years ago before my daughter was born, of liking these kind of, long distance quests that involve a lot of preparation, not huge athletic ability, and mental stamina and commitment. So I did triathlons, I did marathons, but that was 3 decades ago. So the question I had is now at this stage in life when I still have all the drive to do it and some more time to prepare, could I pull it off? And the preparation was key to managing the anxiety and give me some confidence that I was ready to give it a go.
Yeah, and just for some context, when you emailed me, you said, I'm scheduled to climb Grand Trek Kilimanjaro with Thompson. I want to make sure my fitness routine is sufficient to reach the goals. I have access to a fitness center and always have some free weights at home. I'm 68 years old and I always like a good physical quest. So that's just a little context. We're going to get into a lot of stuff. And a little context for you, Bob. You wrote to me, from what I've seen of my sister's goals, I feel comfortable with distance and elevation gain goals today for each week that you shared with her. I think I could probably handle the climb today if climbing was only every other day. So I want to have confidence that I can handle it every day. I'm also concerned about scree, in particular on the downhill. I haven't used poles to this point, but I think I should probably start for this trip. So anyway, that's a little bit of context, but let's get two things out of the way at the very beginning. Susan, you can start, and Bob, you can chime in if you want. Tell me about the 2 days of flight catastrophes.
Well, I'll let Bob tell you how brilliant he was in going a day early so he could be there confident, in control, tanned, rested, and ready. He can brag about that, and I give him his full due. Because instead, my daughter and I did sort of anybody in our family listen to this will laugh, because my modus operandi is to cram as many things in as possible. So long story short, I cut it too tight. And when we ran into a massive snowstorm connecting through Amsterdam, everything fell apart. We were late for the one flight to Kilimanjaro, one flight, not just daily, but for the next 2 days. And Amsterdam was such a mess because of the snow. Literally, KLM systems imploded. People couldn't talk to an attendant. The computer system broke down, and there was no way to sort this out. So my daughter and I spent all night finding different alternatives. I literally used different credit cards to book different convoluted flights to try to get to Kilimanjaro 2 days hence. We got back to the airport, to Schiphol Airport on Sunday, to see which of our 3 alternatives we booked would actually go forth. In the end, 2 didn't, but we didn't know that. We just picked the right one. We flew through Nairobi. We sat all night in the Nairobi airport. We literally got to Kilimanjaro International Airport in time to be whisked up the mountain and join Bob and the rest of the trek as they were starting.
At the trailhead.
Oh, wow. I've never heard that before. That's a first.
No sleep in airports for almost 3 nights, all this chaos and anxiety that we weren't going to make it. And then we had a sense of triumph that we got to the trailhead. And then it dawned on me, oh gosh, now we have to start the real quest, which is the climb. So I had a surge. I was so happy to be at the trailhead. That had become a goal in and of itself, that the anxiety didn't kick in right away until we started. I realized, wow, I could use a really good night's sleep and maybe a hot shower, but that's not to be had. So we had to hunker down and press on.
Wow, that's a little bit tricky. So Bob, pat on the back to you. What in life gave you the that intuition there to, schedule?
It was actually more, to some extent, it was more practical. It's like it was like $800 cheaper to fly on New Year's Day versus January 2nd, which was still a mess in the U.S. So I barely made my flights, but I made all the flights, but the luggage didn't make it. Well, Amsterdam had so many problems that it didn't make it out of Amsterdam. So my duffel didn't make it. And my duffel actually was lost for a week. So I got it so they did deliver it up the mountain, and they did deliver it to me the night before the summit, before the big summit night. That's when I finally got my duffel.
So we lost our duffels too. So in terms of kind of these mental things that could drag you down, we all just had to shrug it off. Okay, we're going to deal with what's in our backpack, and we press on, which Bob had to do longer even than Eve and I did.
Well, I mean, they didn't know, so they did bring a selection of rental gear to the trailhead that we could, and so yes, I mean, with that selection of stuff, we were generally covered. So, but it was annoying not to have my actual duffel, and it was annoying because I was actually there a day early, but they had 2 days to get I had 2 days to get the bag to me, and they couldn't. They lost it for a whole week. And then they actually got their bags like 2 days earlier than me, even though they were, so it was a mess. But
life's not fair. That's one of those things.
Yeah.
So, what did you not have with you the entire time until summit day?
So I mean, the packing list, they do say put these in your carry-ons and have your backpack as your carry-on. And I had a separate bladder we both had porters, but our personal porters. So, but I brought a bladder backpack as well, so I used those as my 2 carry-ons and fit all my basically underwear and things like that, and that's what they recommend is all that stuff. And basically, it's the super cold weather stuff that they don't recommend. So that was the stuff in the duffel. I had snacks in the duffel and things like that you had recommended. That was all in the duffel, or mostly in the duffel. And we had previously set up to rent poles just to not have to carry those. So, and we both all rented kind of parkas. So, really it was just the base layer, like, the heavy duty base weight layer on the top and bottom. That was the extra stuff I had to have, and, mittens. So those were the things that I was missing because those are the things that were in the duffel. But they did have those I could rent and have to deal with the travel insurer or KLM or whatever to see if I can get recouped for that small charge. But
okay, I have not heard in all these years. I haven't heard that. Okay, there's a first. All right, super. The listeners will definitely. I don't know what to take away from that. You, Bob, if they were to follow your lead, it doesn't matter.
With Susan's example, it's more a case that look to see if your airline offers a flight the next day. Sunday happens to be the only day KLM didn't offer that flight. So it was...
Yeah,
if they don't offer a flight the next day, then you're really kind of in bad shape. So that was the bad thing.
The other takeaway, I think, is we did follow very scrupulously the advice from Thompson Truck and what to put in our carry-on. So we did have the essential stuff to get going, and we wore our hiking boots, and we did exactly what they told us to do, which is why, we limited what we had to rent to just the cold weather gear. But the stuff even I were missing, like we wanted our comfy camp shoes so we didn't have to wear boots every second, when you're going to the privy in the middle of the night and you got to put your hiking boots on versus some comfortable shoes. And we had a few other things like that just were psychological support that were in our duffels that we had to wait a few days to get. But follow what they tell you, because it really made a difference for us.
Okay, good advice. All right, so that was the first thing I wanted to talk about before we dive in. The other thing is you sent me an email. You said, Bob, Eve, and I are going to have a snack tasting party today to lock in our snacks. I got to hear about a snack tasting party. How do we do this? How does it work?
But wait, well, we were still choosing at home. We put all the different snacks that you recommended, along with some others that we saw at REI just for fun. And we laid all those out on the kitchen island. And then we went through, my son joined in, even though he wasn't able to go on the trek, and figured out what we liked best, because there's no reason not to personalize this, right? And so I will tell you, though, that of all these protein snacks and energy, and we had some complement of those, what I loved the most, which tasted like the biggest reward, was a Snickers bar. And for those of us who worry about calories and it feels so decadent to have a Snickers bar in normal life, like, darn, I'm going to enjoy this Snickers bar every bit. I'm going to lick my fingers. So I had at least 2 of those on the trail, and they were much appreciated.
Yeah, Bob, what was your favorite? Well, anything else? Did you like? A lot of my clients like the energy chews, like the Scratch energy chews, or did you guys have any of those?
After we finally got our duffels, yes, but
and they were great. Like particularly on summit day, you're feeling the altitude more, and they, you need a little extra, and it's hard to stop and eat. So I thought those energy chews were very useful then.
And we did have, I guess, the energy chews and the kind of like the semi-liquid squirt stuff that you come in the little metallized container. Definitely use those on summer day to try to get a little more energy.
So the Snickers is in my snack presentation, okay? And so they're very much, if people are wondering if they've had Lara Bars has a similar macro profile as to a Snickers. FYI, folks can look that up. Let's get into some numbers here, okay? I think this would be kind of fun. I don't want anybody tuning out, so listen closely here. So, during your training, both Susan and Bob, you guys had a different diversification of the way you achieved your elevation gain goals. So Susan, you got 40% of your elevation on treadmill, 20% on stairs, and 40% on hikes and walks. And Bob, you were almost 100% on stairs and the use of a sledding hill. Okay. You had a little treadmill, but not much. Okay. The final week, distance and elevation gain weekly averages. Okay. Right before your taper week. Your average, Bob, was 17 miles. Okay. So basically you averaged 17 miles a week. Susan, you averaged 13 miles a week. Elevation gain average. Bob, you averaged 4,600. Susan, you averaged 3,200. Record distance in 1 week. For you, Bob, it was week 1. You did 21 miles total that week. Susan, it was in week 3. You did 24 miles. The record elevation gain in a week. Bob, it was week 8. You did a total of 6,700. Susan, it was in week 4. You did 4,600. And then the record elevation gain in one single event was your Milestone challenge. For Bob, for you, it was in week 8. You did 4,150 feet in one event. You did 2,500 feet on stairs and 1,650, I guess, going up and down that hill.
In that case, it was the hill next to Susan's home, but which a little.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
That was a little higher than the sledding. The sledding hill is only like 30 feet. Susan's hill is like 70 feet, so it was a little, but not as steep.
Okay, got it. Okay, all right, interesting. And then Susan, it was week 11 for you. You did 4,000 feet. You did 2,000 on treadmill, 1,000 on stairs, and 1,000 on hiking. Okay. Any comments on that, guys? No? Okay.
I do think the your system and you're illustrating it with the different approaches we had gives us, whomever's doing it, some optionality. You can kind of, pick what you have closest to you. You can pick what you like. There's a lot of different ways to the same goal. And I think for me, I go into the gym to lift weights and do strength training. And then I've always liked to do my aerobic things outdoors, whether it's running or biking or, now walking and hiking. So I don't really like these kind of routinized things, but I found it just so efficient, but I had to sort of vary it. So I literally would go to the gym and do the treadmill. And then to mix it up, I drive to an outdoor stairs because I just thought it was more interesting to do a stairs outdoors than inside. And then I'd go and park to this hill bend Bob's talking about. So there was these little breaks in between when I was having a snack or drinking a Gatorade. But I think you said to me, it doesn't have to be done speedily. If it takes you 4.5 hours to do all this, that's okay. You're getting the elevation gain. And there were big pauses in there, but I did move around as opposed to trying to do it all in one location. So psychologically for me, that just made it all work better. And I listened to HikeStrong Podcast and lots of podcasts, but still I like just looking at something different than always the treadmill in the gym view or, a particular staircase or the big hill near my house.
So, Susan, one thing you mentioned was that you really enjoyed episode 25 and 26.
Yeah.
It was the mother-daughter who summited Kili together. Listeners can go and check those episodes out. What was it that you took away from that?
So it's Alex and Hillary. Is Hillary the mother? Yeah. So I did resonate with her kind of perspective on it. Somebody who'd been a tennis player, had a torn ACL. I think she thought all this training had helped her kind of condition in a new way and give her new strength. And so I was resonating with that with my hips replacement, having been a runner, and the changes I had to make. But the thing she said about hiking was so powerful, and hiking is very much how we move on a daily basis. So it's a wonderful sport in that way, whether you're climbing Kilimanjaro over 10 days, or as Bob and I did multiple times, went to the Appalachian Trail here near my house, or the Catoctin Mountains, and get in a good hike that way. It's turned out to be a really productive investment for me in learning how to do something that I can enjoy and continue to enjoy, that I think is just good for my overall health and mobility and physical, overall positive physical condition.
A quick interruption to the podcast, but I wanted to share that we're building something shaped by decades of training hikers for epic adventures. At the core of the HikeStrong app is what we call the readiness engine. It takes 6 simple activities almost everyone has access to: stairs, step-ups, treadmills, hill repeats, stair machines, and outdoor hikes and walks, and translates them into the only language that the mountain understands: vertical elevation gain. So head over to HikeStrongApp.com to learn more. And now back to the conversation. I'm going to do some deep dive questions. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to alternate. Susan, I'm going to start with you, and then I'll ask a question to Bob and Susan, and so on. Now, after I pose the question to Susan, for example, if Bob, you're like something is, burning in your brain there and you want to respond, okay, go ahead. And if not, no big deal. I'll just go to the next question, and so on and so forth. And I'm asking Bob a question. Susan, if there's something that you want to add to it, then go ahead, okay? So let's go ahead and do that. So Susan, I'm going to start with you. So after hip replacements, there's often a gap between what the body can do and what you trust it to do. So when did that gap start to close for you?
I've had 2 hip replacements, and the second one, maybe I was just better prepared. I think also I didn't wait so long to have the joint replaced. So I was I had created less workarounds, was in stronger just condition. That's a decision everybody has to make for themselves. But for whatever reason, the second one, the recovery was faster. So I felt certainly within 3 months when I had that post-op checkup that I was moving very well, much more comfortably than I had before the joint was replaced. And I said to, because the second hip was replaced literally December 12th, 2024, and I climbed Kilimanjaro literally 1 year, 1 month later. Okay. So at the 6-month checkup, which was, June, I said to the doctor, I feel great. He said, you look great, no restrictions. I said, do you mean that? Because I want to climb Kilimanjaro. And he said, I love it. Do it. So with that go ahead, I just jumped into, I felt then I had the license to, ramp up biking and hiking and moving as if I'd never had a joint replacement. And then I culminated it all with the more intense training in the last 3 months before I went. So it really was a year from joint replacement to Kilimanjaro. I guess I'll credit the surgeon, I'll credit Marcus, and then just, a desire to do it. Hiking is a very, very good sport because it has you in condition, but it allows you to move in a way that's not tearing down joints the way running and some other sports do.
Said very well. Bob, question for you. When you first said yes to Kilimanjaro, what was that private concern that you didn't really voice out loud?
Well, it's just all the things you read about. It's like, and to some extent, telling Susan, you're signing up for this. This is like extremely cold. You don't like the cold. You're in a tent. She tends to sleep in nicer hotels. is this really what you want to do? It's like, to some extent, it would just kind of shock. And my friends that know Susan all said the same thing. Susan wanted to do this? Or even people that don't know me. It tends to be like a lawyer I was working with, and I told her I was going, and it's like, and your sister wanted to do this? Anyway, to some extent, those are part of as many things that were going around in my mind. And then it's like, I've never done it. It's been never really done anything like this. Susan had talked about how she had wanted to do a marathon. So she did one marathon a long time ago, whatever. It's just, and she did a triathlon. I'd never really done anything like that. And my biggest was really going to film on Boy Scout camp. And that was 50 years ago, literally 50 years ago. And I was much better prepared for this trek. So that was probably the other thing in the back of my mind is I didn't prepare well enough for that at age 15. You can get by with more at 15, but you also had to carry your own pack, and packs were heavier then. I mean, everything was heavier 50 years ago. So anyway, I had problems. So that went into the back of my mind too. It's like I didn't really do well on my one thing like this at age 15. How am I going to do this? So having porters and things like that helps a lot.
Susan, any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I think I liked well, let me say this differently. For people who are listening and considering this is a quest that really challenges you physically, mentally, emotionally. And you just have to like that kind of thing to even want to go into this. And Bob's point about the reactions from friends, we're all sharing that with the rest of our hiking group going up Kili. You'd literally say at a family dinner or a cocktail party or any kind of social gathering, oh, this is what we're going to do. And you get the reactions were one of two ways. You've got to be kidding. Why would you ever want to do that? Or you're kidding. Tell me more. I'd love to do that. And it produces two kinds of reactions. But I think this is for you if you like this kind of holistic quest. And so, yes, I like to stay in nice places. I haven't lost that desire, but I also wanted something that was kind of all consuming to see if I could do it. And I feel inordinately proud of this accomplishment. I've done a few other things in my life, but there's just something about this. I smile every time I think about it. And it's pretty cool.
That's cool. All right. Question for you, Susan. So balance work became a big theme in your training. How did working on balance change the way you moved and thought on uneven terrain?
Yeah, so balance work was a big challenge. And I will assure everybody that Marcus is a true diplomat, because I tried the first round of balance sequencing that you had me do, and there was a long pause from Marcus. He said, well, I've been doing this a long time. I think this is going to be a challenge for you, which was another way of saying, wow, you are one of the worst I've seen ever in my entire career. And I am. And Bob kindly and loyally as a brother said, you used to be good at balance. So I guess that gave me some, reassurance that in part just having two hips replaced, and in spite of all the PT and everything, it's something I had to work on. But the other thing you said, Marcus, which I took heart, the worst thing you can do is not do any training at all. Because my instinct when I'm bad at something is I don't want to do that anymore. I'm going to go climb another round of stairs because I can, check that off, and I'm going to go do the hill outside my house. I don't want to do balance, which I really stink at. But I do think persevering with it helped me. I just decided I had to have those trek poles with me. There was one night we were camped in a really rocky, hilly place, and I had the tent poles there to go to the privy in the middle of the night because I just thought I don't even want to risk trying to pick my way through here with my headlamp. So I worked on balance. I got better. I do think I can, trot down the stairs now and, look at the bottom. I'm not watching my feet. Those sound like kind of small things, but some of it's just the confidence that you have your bearings in a way that you need to be to go around daily life. And then I've got my trek poles for hiking.
Okay. Bob, I'm going to actually ask this question a little bit differently to you. You came in to the training play with a strong aerobic base, but balance and strength became a bigger part of your plan. What surprised you most about that shift?
Well, the three people over 40 on the trek, two I'd be, all had problems during that first maybe hour or something when you're going down. And then there basically were enough guides that the guys, the other man and I, we each had a guide on each of our hands, and they just kind of walked us down. And Susan is light enough she could have the one guy, and he just kind of took her, and she zoomed down. She was faster than anyone, practically, just because he took her arm and zoomed down. So
he was like my other trek pole.
yeah. So anyway, that there was kind of that part for where they did us maybe two stretches of 15 minutes where they had I had a guide on each arm. I guess I did fall a couple other times. Those were actually more in the rainforest area where you're kind of on mud, where the rocks are really slippery, and that's clearly the balance related. But I fell on my butt in those cases, so I mean there was no injury, no concern, no pain, nothing. But yes, I was probably the only one of the 8 of us that fell on my butt because my balance was so poor. But it was still okay. It's just that it was what it was.
Okay, so here are my thoughts from that. So you and I had we actually trained together for about 10 weeks. Okay, so let's say a listener is really paying attention to what you're saying, and they're telling themselves that they have terrible balance too. Okay, looking back, Bob, I guess logically, it seems that if you had done balance training instead of like 10 weeks prior, maybe 20 weeks would be better. 24 weeks would be better of balance training. So I guess for the listener, you should just start balance training now for whatever adventure you might do. And it's just good for practical daily life anyway. But Bob, do you have a comment on that?
Oh, everything I read says balance is one of the most important things. I'm poor at it, so I should do more. I should continue doing more. So yes, I have to keep thinking about that. But yes, I would recommend anyone listening should do the balance exercise and treat those seriously. Some extent, since I was always so poor, when you're horrible at something, it's not always self-motivating to improve, and it's hard to see the improvement too, which makes it harder to continue doing it.
Yeah. I would just add, I do think starting earlier, and I had, of course, the same reaction. I'm terrible at this and I hate doing it, but I did get marginally better. So continuing it and starting earlier is good. But I also found, I don't want people to listen and say, well, I have terrible balance, I can't do this. I just realized I had to be very purposeful about where to put my feet all the time. And, that just always be thinking, have my poles, always be thinking. Because I found one time just not going up the trail. We were standing there and I whipped around to go take my turn to go behind the one rock where, everyone's using the same rock to go to the bathroom. And I sort of whipped around just on some scree, like standing in one place. And I went down on my knee. Now, it wasn't a problem other than you're like, geez, that was clumsy of you. But it just reminded me I had to be thinking about it all the time. And that it worked. I mean, Bob and I were both able to do it, as was the other person who was over 50. He also did it. But I think, as you said, Bob, all 3 of us were a little more challenged in that regard than Bob's niece, my daughter, who's 28. And, I don't think she used the poles hardly at all, ever, just as an example. Their age does not prevent you from doing it, but it does make a difference in the ease with which you do some of the things.
Yeah, something else that comes to mind is, for the listeners, if you're not comfortable with trekking poles, get some and start practicing. Even if you live in a flat environment, you need to learn to coordinate. Put those rubber tips on, even if you're on pavement, and just coordinate your, you're going to coordinate your arms with your legs. It's easy to just go online and look at some videos on that. But do it earlier. Start balance earlier and start working with your trekking poles earlier as well. Susan, what was the fear that lingered the longest for you during training?
For me, the fear was just the unknown. How is I going to react to the altitude? I mean, people that you've had interviewed on this podcast, other friends who've done it, everybody admits that the altitude is going to hit you in some manner or fashion at some point along the trip. And, yes, it's a mental game. And yes, you follow what the guides tell you to do in terms of drinking water and eating, even though you don't feel like it. But I was worried about something that I couldn't control preventing me from finishing the quest. And then that led to the second thing, which is, my friends who know me well said, how are you going to handle it if you can't go the distance to the summit? Because they know how crazed I can get about, reaching a goal. I mean, we were crazed in that running around Amsterdam airport trying to get there. And I was doing a lot of talking to myself in advance. Not, much. You told me at one point, Marcus, I think you can do this. You've got the strength. You're ready. That gave me confidence. I was pretty confident I could do it, but that was always there. Like, what if something unknown happens? What if you just do have a clumsy moment and you sprain your ankle and there's no way to power through? So I was worried about that and trying to get myself in the right headspace that I would be more unhappy with myself if I didn't try. That was what I finally landed on. I was so committed to this. I wanted to try. And if something unexpected prevented me from getting to the summit, I could still be semi-satisfied that I had gotten out there and done it.
I just remembered something I wanted to bring up. People have to understand about, the porters and the guides for Kilimanjaro is part of the success model. That is part of the equation. When you guys talk about the guides helping you down in the scree fields, some people find it hard to ask for help or get help. The great thing particularly about Thompson guides, they already know what you need. And you don't have to ask. And I'm sure they made you feel comfortable about accepting the help, right?
Yes, absolutely.
I can't speak for any other climbing companies. I know Thompson's guides are pros. And by the end of your climb, you'll be comfortable about accepting their help. But start with that mindset from the very beginning of your climb.
So I would just double down on that point. Thompson Trek's guides are outstanding. And we did have a little running joke about, this isn't an inexpensive quest and, you're doing a lot of work and, you're going to stay in a tent. And we'd kind of look at other things we could go do that were maybe less expensive and had nicer accommodations. But the bottom line is you're paying first and foremost for the knowledge of those guides, and they have your life in their hands and they help you meet your goal. But all the things that are built in, the pulse oximeter reading every night around dinner became a communal activity, monitoring how much you're drinking. And I think they had a meeting, right, Bob, every day, the guides, and they kind of reviewed how we were all doing. And that's how they knew, just suddenly, Gabe or Emma or Paul would show up at my elbow. Okay, this is a really tricky part. Watch what you're doing. I think they knew each of our weaknesses and strengths and were just using their professional training and knowledge to support us. We got ourselves up that mountain and down. I don't want to in any way say we were carried, but their advice and counsel and wisdom was essential, I will say, to my success, and I think everybody's success.
Yes, and especially clearly they by the last few days of the trip, they knew about how every single one of the 8 of us was going to take. The one person they had judged was probably going to take twice as long to go a particular route than most of the others. So they the last day, for example, just to make all the schedules and flights and lunch and everything. I mean, they said, okay, to accommodate everyone, this person needs to start like an hour and a half earlier than the others. And the person was willing to do that, and so did that. But it was interesting. They were spot on exactly how long. I mean, it took him almost to the minute, well, probably to the 10 minutes to do that last day's trek down to the trailhead. They knew exactly how long it was going to take. And so clearly they've got a lot of experience with many people and experience with the 8 of us. So they, for the most part, knew how long it was going to take each of us to make that last trek and kind of started us at different times to allow us all to kind of finish together and eat lunch and have an enjoyable kind of last lunch before we head off to the airport.
Excellent. Susan, question. What did completing the milestone challenges give you that the regular workouts didn't?
I think the intensity of the milestone challenges is a critical part of your whole wisdom, as I came to understand it. It gives you that extra stamina that you certainly need on, just to keep going the distance every day for 10 days. And then, we hiked 9 hours on summit day, Bob? I mean, pretty much straight up 4,000 feet of elevation. I mean, that's a hard day. And I think every milestone challenge added up and gave me what I needed to be able to then just deal with what I was struggling with. Because as the elevation got higher and higher, I was having to work really hard to control my breathing and maintain a rhythm with that. But I wasn't having to think about, do I have a cramp in my, left calf, or am I, are my legs getting tired? I didn't think about that at all. I could focus on managing my breathing so that I could go the distance up.
Bob, any thoughts about the milestone challenges?
I mean, some guy was just forcing me to kind of put everything together in a day. I guess I didn't necessarily have an oh wow about it. I think I created my own kind of second one. I think it was Thanksgiving Day, just because it was a nice day. I wanted to go outside. And so I walked up and down the sledding hill for an hour and a half to get elevation and kind of created my own kind of route. And then the last day, it was just like, okay, the last milestone was obviously the longest for all the parts. And so that, I felt good. I didn't have really an oh wow reaction, but I definitely, like Susan said, I didn't have cases in the mountain. It did. Ultimately, the whole thing together prepared me that really there was almost the only point that I felt any soreness at all was probably on the first day down. The downhill just stresses things differently than everything else. And I'm not saying I really felt pain or anything or concern. It was just my point is that's the only time I felt really anything that my body was saying, what are you doing? And that's your 8 days into the hike at that time. And actually those are some of the longest hikes because you're going kind of the fastest. So yes, the whole thing together kind of prepared me. I felt well and didn't have any really concerns about my body.
Okay. Susan, we had one of our weekly calls, and I made a note that you had responded exceptional to polling on your last hike, and you mentioned something about feeling foolish for not having used poles before. Any thoughts on that?
Well, actually, the really foolish part was I had not used poles properly. I was kind of using it going up like a cane, and maybe that's with the hip replacement. The PTs show you how to support the non-surgical or support the surgical leg. But you showed me it's more like ski poles, right? Where you're pushing back, and then when you go down, it's like a brake. It was just a little seemingly small correction you made, and then I felt, wow, these are great. These poles really give you some extra, certainly balance, but just leverage as you're ascending, and certainly were essential going down. And after we used them for 10 days, I don't know how you felt, Bob, but it was just like an extension of my body. I was just so used to those poles, picking them up and moving with them, that I didn't think twice about it.
Let's go with, I want you both to address this one, but Bob, we'll go with you. So after this experience, how do you now define being fit compared to when running was your main outlet?
Actually, I guess how I feel about it or how I define it probably hasn't changed that much. I guess I wasn't a jogger until like I started jogging really on my 60th, after I turned 60, just to get another outlet. I'd never really done it before, so I've actually kind of become liking it. I don't go fast, but I like the way I feel. So I guess it hasn't really changed things, how I view things.
Is there anything that you'll incorporate from your training kind of in what we call the off season without a planned adventure, or are you just going to go back to kind of like pre-trek training with your running?
Well, clearly I should incorporate more balance. I guess the thing I haven't mentioned is the lunge training you had me do is one of the probably one of the most valuable. I mean, the format that you set up and just kind of the spreadsheet and just the training goals and things like that, and the milestones, those are very valuable. And those are things that are kind of easily, you can set those goals and figure out the times or whatever. The lunges were kind of a surprise, just in the sense that I think I did the one you suggested the one day, and I said, oh, these are easy. And I did a little more than you had recommended. The next day I paid for it. I couldn't do any lunges for like 3 days because it's like, okay, my muscles were saying, you haven't done this. I do feel that allowed me to not have problems on the mountain. And if I hadn't done the lunge training, I think I would have felt more like my body was failing me. So the lunges, and I'm kind of replaying that back in my head. I should really go start doing those 3 times a week, or the sort of rate that you were recommending, just because it was clearly just the pain that I was having the first few times. Then I worked through it. I worked up to your recommended rate and didn't have a problem. And then I think I started with the chair assist, and then was able to, and then you'd recommended getting rid of the chair at the end, and had just use a pillow to make sure you don't slam your knee into the floor or something. And didn't have any, and I was able to see the progress there, and also able to feel it, but I didn't feel it the next day. The first couple of weeks or whatever, it's like I went from the first time not being able to do anything for 3 or 4 days, lunges, and then at least feeling moderate pain, and then really at the end, nothing. So the lunges, I guess I felt the progression that you were kind of pushing me toward, and I felt the value. And that was probably one thing that surprised me of the training, is I hadn't really thought that. I never had that aha moment on balance. I guess I would like to figure out how to get an aha moment on balance, but the lunges, I definitely had that.
Well, so the balance and the lunge progression actually work synergistically, okay? So think of them as complementary. And the two of those together, done over, week after week, will give you that sure-footedness, Bob, that I think you would have liked to have for your trip, because maybe you'll do another adventure, who knows? So go back to the tracking chart, initiate your lunge progression, reinitiate your balance progression, and you'll see the two of those will work together. And in time, you'll be more sure-footed on trails in general. And just a reminder, balance twice a week, lunge 1 to 2 times a week. Definitely not 3. Susan, we haven't talked about lunges. Any thoughts on that? You worked with a trainer, so you did lunges with your trainer, correct?
Well, I actually did some strength training with the trainer, but I did your lunge progression, and I agree with Bob. I think that was another part like the Milestone challenges that, and just gaining elevation that added strength. It also was useful to me with the, any residual muscles that hadn't been tapped with the sort of hip replacements and that kind of thing. I feel that the lunges rounded out my conditioning. So I feel stronger than I have since I started that whole journey of hip replacements, which for anybody who's gone through a joint replacement, it doesn't begin with the surgery. It's all the descent when you're realizing you have a problem and you try to manage the joint until it's replaced. So it's, it was actually probably, because my first hip started bothering me in the middle of COVID. I probably had a 5-year stretch in there when I was not at the level of fitness I was used to. All of this has brought me back to feeling very strong and capable, and I want to be able to maintain that now.
Okay. Susan, training and climbing with your brother, did that add pressure, comfort, or something else entirely?
It actually was good to have a training partner who was, as you said, we had different starting points physically, but we had similar questions. And whenever Bob was visiting here in Washington, it was somebody who was equally committed as I was to finding the good hike. And, we can get to the Appalachian Trail from here in Washington, D.C., but it's an hour and a half, 2 hours. So you have to have somebody who wants to go for it to find the, hike that's rated at a more difficult level. So we were very purposeful about that. We did. And we actually had a couple of challenging moments when we looked at each other and said, is Kilimanjaro going to be like this, with complicated rock scrambles on one? And then we did another one when it was registering about 102 or 103 degrees. Bob and I had not brought enough water. Bob, of course, better prepared. So we had a couple sort of super challenging hikes that made us even more committed to being prepared for Kilimanjaro. But I think that was all good. And then you fast forward to the, packing and snacks, and it's just great to have a partner and all that. And, ultimately make sure we'd covered all the bases and we were sort of savoring it or getting anxious about it together.
Okay. Bob, I'm going to ask you it a little differently. Did training for the same goal as your sister make you feel more responsible, more competitive, or more calm? Or something else?
Maybe of those three, probably responsible. She's been always the more competitive one. So, well, to some extent, I was competitive enough. I wanted to succeed. If she succeeded, I wanted to succeed, but not necessarily to beat her. I wasn't competitive in that perspective, other than it's like, so that's probably more how it was. But also it's just, I'm not one that's going to do it by myself. So if she hadn't suggested it, I never would have done it. As I said earlier, she kind of pushed me definitely out of my comfort zone. But definitely having Susan and then Susan's daughter, Eve, made a huge difference as well. Just to have other people you're hiking with.
Okay. So Susan, let's go with you on this one. Now that you know what your body is capable of, how has this changed the way you think about future adventures?
Well, I'd love to have at least one adventure like this a year. And I already sent Bob a link to a hike in New Zealand. I think I said to you, Marcus, well, where should we go next? And you said, well, maybe pick a part of the world you want to go to. And then there's going to be great hikes and experiences. So New Zealand's a country everybody raves about. I haven't been to. It's just one option, but the hike looked kind of cool. And so that's an option. Then, of course, we could go wine tasting in the week that followed the hike. So there's ways to spice this all up. Maybe we'll take on a biking quest next too. We both like to bike, and it'd be something else in the same context that you're having to train for, get your strength up, and, then be committed to the 5, 6, 7, 8 days that you're on the road.
Bob, now that you've been home for a while, what part of this experience still stays with you the most?
obviously the summit is a big deal. But completing the whole thing, including the summit, is something that, as Susan said earlier, just kind of smile, and it's like I tell friends, and everyone's kind of surprised. I'm not the one that they would vote to be that person. I had a different friend who all of us that know him do expect he would do something like this, and it's the first time I'd ever been told that he said it was on his bucket list, that I was doing something that was on his bucket list that he hadn't done. It's like, whoa, because he's done trucking on South Georgia Island with slightly more technical and other things, and to hear him say it was on his bucket list, I felt, well. So I guess those are probably the things that sit with me. I mean, Susan and I have talked about in other treks, and it's like, okay, do we really want to spend a night at 5 degrees out at 18,000 feet suffering altitude sickness in the crater camp? Because most tours don't stay at the crater camp, partly because they know people tend to be miserable that night. In this case, we probably, whatever. We did spend the night. It was kind of miserable. And it was cold. And so having something and experiences that in a tent, on a cot or whatever, probably don't want to choose. I'm not going to choose something that has that experience. But
we left it all on Kilimanjaro, but there's other physical quests, but we both agree, but maybe even a little hut might be nice. Tea houses in Nepal or something like that, as we're, getting ideas out there. All of that could work.
The cold, the temperature hiking itself wasn't really ever a problem. It was cold, whatever. It's like that wasn't a problem. Actual active hiking, just that night at the crater camp was something I could do.
Yeah, it's tough for everybody. Yeah, you can't train for that. If you want that experience, you got to deal with it.
Yeah.
Susan, any anecdotes or suggestions for listeners about training for Kilimanjaro?
One, just I won't skirt around the altitude sickness. Be prepared that you may have a day when it hits you more forcefully. It certainly did me. It was the second day. Now, I think that was coupled with several nights in airports, not enough sleep, the altitude sickness. And I got back from our trek that day, or not back, got to the new camp, and I kind of curled up in the sleeping bag and went, wow, I don't feel well at all. The head guide, awesome. He sat there right across from me as I'm curled up and said, you have to eat. It's going to help you. And he would not leave until I got a whole bowl of vegetable broth inside of me, along with a little bread. And then he said, I promise tomorrow's going to be better. And it was. So you can get through it, but that's where you're always advised this is a mental journey. So I just wanted to make sure that anecdote was clear. I got through it, but I had a moment of like, I can get it out one more day feeling this bad, but I don't know that I can do, another 6 days. But then I got better, which was great, just as promised. The other thing I struggled with was the guides. Everybody says it's a mental journey. Stay in the moment and stay with the day at hand and celebrate that you got to the end of that, 6-7 mile day going straight up. That's easier said than done. I think our minds just want to leap ahead to the summit. And for me, I think I could have gotten overwhelmed if I started worrying about the summit on day 2 or day 3. I really worked hard to keep myself present each day and celebrate at the end of the day that we did it, and then wake up and say, okay, whatever was bothering me yesterday, I'm going to start a fresh day. And I've told this story to many people who all agree, maybe it's just modern life, maybe whatever, but we all have trouble being present in a moment and being fully focused there. And the mountain was a great teacher for me in that regard. It was like a whole mental discipline that I had to actively embrace in order to be able to achieve the summit goal and then get back down.
Yeah, in the episode with Alexis and Hillary, they talked about that.
Yeah.
The guides did not let them think about the next day, kept them present. Episode 16, it's Carolyn. I think she's the senior track advisor for Thompson Safaris or Thompson Treks. And she says that pretty much everybody feels altitude sickness. It's not always serious. Most of the time it's not. So don't think it's not about avoiding it. It's knowing that you'll have some form of it and then just trusting your guides. Tell your guides. They'll probably know ahead of time, that you're about to feel it. That's how intuitive they are. And just listen to what they say. So I don't think that should be discouraging for anybody to hear. It is what it is.
I completely agree with that. And it goes back to control the conditioning. Because I wasn't worried about my, physical strength, I had some, emotional and, physical bandwidth to power through the altitude sickness. And the head guide, Gabriel, I'll say his name. He was really an extraordinary individual. That man could run anything. He's a natural leader, but he got me through that altitude sickness. And him looking me in the eye, really like right in front of me and saying, tomorrow will be better. I promise it's going to be okay. I just said thank you and curled back up and slept through the night and was ready to go the next day.
All right. So last question, same thing for Bob. So any anecdotes or suggestions for listeners about training for Kilimanjaro?
It's not really, as you've kind of alluded, is just look what maybe motivates you in your environment to get the elevation. Getting the elevation, I do think that's something you emphasize in your training. It's critical. And you can do that anywhere. In my case, everything is very flat. And so artificial sledding hills are the only thing in the area where you can get some elevation. And they at least have the advantage that they're fairly steep. I mean, the one I had that's like 35 feet, it's actually similar in steepness to some of the up and down in Kilimanjaro. So more so than a street or something like that. So that was my biggest advice. And I was outside, like Susan said. I'm not a big person that wants to sit in the treadmill or have treadmill elevation. I wanted something else, and so that was what I found to give me a variation. That something I could get to 20 minutes from a house or 15 minutes. And that was what I did.
Yeah. Oh, you bring up a good point. You're exactly right. And I stress the elevation gain is the key metric for success. Particularly on Kili, it's not so much distance, it's the elevation gain. And so there are 6 ways to get elevation gain. Now, they're not all equal. And this is more for the listener, because you guys know this, but you can do incline treadmill, Stairmaster machine or stair stepper machine, hill repeats. Bob, you did that. Stairs, step ups, and hikes and walks. I believe that's 6 things. Emphasize that for just about any hike that has elevation. So anyway, let's leave it at that. This was great. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to do this. Bob, we had to twist your arm a little bit, but this was amazing. You really added a lot of value to the conversation, so I appreciate you coming on in. So grateful that you guys gave me the opportunity to work with you both. It was really a lot of fun. You were 2 very different people, and that was very interesting to me and a lot of fun. So anyway, I guess this is where we bid our farewells. I hope you'll stay in touch. And if you do plan another adventure, let's be in touch, and I'd be happy to help you again, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
appreciated your characterization of us as, older people that can do it. I thought you sized us both up beautifully, and hopefully this will be motivating. That when we talked in advance, we both agreed we wanted to be positive for people who like this kind of thing. So I hope they listen and say, okay, we can do it too. But
I think they will. if they're trending, if they're listening to this and they're already trending towards, they're not sure about it.
Yeah.
I think this will put them over the edge to do it.
Yeah. This is the how-to. Yeah. It's getting real.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, guys. Thank you so much.
You'll let us know.
It's good to see you.
It'll be aired sometime down the road. I'm sure you've got a lot in the queue, but you'll let us know, right?
Yeah. 100%. Give it a couple weeks and we'll publish it. It'll be so fun. I'm glad we were able to memorialize this journey for you. It was great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Good to see you both. Take care. That concludes this episode of the HikeStrong Podcast. I'm committed to keeping all of the episodes for free. All I ask is that you subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. And don't forget to share this podcast with your friends. My goal is to build a vast community of hikers with the confidence to crush any local or global trail. I hope you will join me in this endeavor. So until next time, train, hike, repeat, and as always, I'm here to support you every step of the way.
It was fun. It was fun, right, Bob?
Sure.
Yeah.
You don't know how many times he's given me that kind of answer over our whole life.
Yeah. You're used to it.
That was very familiar.
That was a typical Bob statement.
That was Bob, and Bob in relation to me. Well, I'm sorry our mom isn't alive. She just passed away a year ago in January. Although we both agreed we couldn't have told her if we were going off to do this because she would have been a basket case. But she would love that we did a podcast together, Bob. I mean, I think she'd watch it, about 500 times because it would be so pleasing to her. So there you go, Mom.
All right. Well, that's fun. Well, glad you shared that.